You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Hello, and thank you once again for joining us for the premiere podcast here in New England. I am Matt Spectro, a.k.a. Tarzan Taylor, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way, where the podcast speaks exclusively about wrestling in the New England area. Let me introduce my fellow host. He's a former Liberty States heavyweight champion, and he's the only man on the planet who likes the Super Mario Brothers movie, Julian Starr.
Why do you guys always bury that movie? That movie's actually really good for children. I mean, it's not probably the greatest.
I don't know.
movie.
Maybe it has no resemblance to the video game whatsoever, other than the name.
It kind of does. I mean, there's a toad in there. Yeah, I know it's like a reimagining. So I don't know. I really enjoyed the movie. I also saw it as a kid. I can watch it now and realize why people still hate it. But because I saw it as a kid, I thought it was a great movie. Either way, I'm glad to be here, buddy. I'm a little tired, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, welcome to episode 5 of Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way. You know, this is the show that we exclusively talk about wrestling in New England, the greatest area for pro wrestling in the country, as far as I'm concerned. We're both natives to the area, and we've both been in the wrestling business ourselves. Why don't you explain to the people a little bit more in depth about what our show's about?
Ladies and gentlemen, we can all agree that most wrestling podcasts tend to be a bit too friendly. We can also agree that most people are going to avoid trying to be brutally honest in the event that confrontation may occur. But I can assure you this podcast is going to break that mold. And the term good brother will not fall into the vocabulary of this podcast, as we're going to ask those hard-hitting questions that you've always wanted to know. And we're going to continue to probe to gain the reality. There's not going to be any tiptoeing with us because we plan to address every aspect of New England pro wrestling, no matter how uncomfortable it may become. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a got you moment, nor are we going to put them on the spot. We're not here to embarrass. We are simply here to deliver truth and justice in the New England pro wrestling way.
All right. You enjoying the summer so far, Julian?
It's all right. I mean, I haven't really done much. I'm actually looking forward to going fishing. I wanted to kind of do that today because it seems to be pretty nice out, but it's been okay. We're just starting. I feel like it's a slow start for summer.
Well, that's true, but...
Have you done anything?
No, not really, no. I'm going on vacation to Disney next year, so, trying to save most of my money.
Why are you going to waste your money?
Waste my money?
Yeah.
It's the happiest place on earth.
Is it, though? So what's the thing with like wrestlers in Disneyland? I feel like that's a gimmick or something.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of wrestlers I know are really into Disney, and I don't know if it's... I honestly have no explanation for why that is.
Because literally, like, I never heard of anyone liking Disney until I got into professional wrestling. And then all of a sudden, everyone was a Disney fan. Loved all the movies, loved going to the park. Like, it's the greatest thing in the world. But, like, I'd never heard a word about it up until this point. So at this point, I think it's a gimmick to be cool, but I might be wrong. I don't know.
I mean, to my knowledge, it's Johnny Vegas, myself, Brian Fury, Brian Malonis,
Josh Briggs, Anthony Green,
Brendan Locke.
It's I hear
Scotty Slade.
Yeah, it's everyone thinks it's the greatest place on earth. Now, again, it's going to sound like a miserable prick, but I don't like amusement parks because I have motion sickness. But I don't know. I'm also a homebody, so this is going to sound like I'm just being a miserable cunt. But
easy.
That's sorry. But it's honestly like I don't know. It really does feel like a work at this point.
All right. Well, we're not here to talk Disney.
Why not?
We're here to talk wrestling.
Oh, is that what this podcast is about?
Today's theme is actually one of my favorites, is where we talk about running of a wrestling company.
Yep.
We got to call a name for this segment, maybe like the man behind the curtain or something like that.
Oh, I like that. Look at that, calling shit on the fly.
And today, we're joined by a very special guest. He is a former NECW heavyweight champion. He is a former Green Mountain heavyweight champion. He's a former Chaotic Wrestling heavyweight champion. He's a former All-Star Wrestling All-Stars champion. A former All-Star Wrestling
Can you not read your own writing?
Action Tag Team Championship. He's a former EWA heavyweight champion. He is also the former Liberty States heavyweight champion, and he was the owner and operator of the subject of our podcast today, Front Row Wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to introduce Maverick Wild.
Oh, boy. I'm going to disappoint a lot of people with this. And by the way, I hate Disney. I think Disney is the most terrible place on the planet. I want nothing to do with it. I like amusement parks, but I don't like waiting in lines. I don't need to wait 3 hours to get on, Space Mountain. That's ridiculous.
Have you been to Disney?
Yes, I have. Oh, it was a terrible experience.
All right. Well, anyone who knows anything about New England wrestling knows the name Maverick Wild, and we could probably do a 4-hour podcast just about your wrestling career, but we're going to specifically focus on your wrestling company, Front Row Wrestling. Now, according to my research, it ran from 2003 to 2012. Does that sound about right to you?
Wikipedia. No, it really only lasted about 2.5 years. I mean, it wasn't it didn't run forever. I ran a lot of shows in that area, in between that time, and lost a lot of money. But
I think you're reading my question sheet already.
I'm sorry.
Man, that's really off. So you're saying you probably think it was only about 2-3 years?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably about 3. That sounds about right. Because how it kind of grew was I took over Jeff Costa and Lobsterman, and again Wolfman had stopped running shows, and I wanted to continue running their style of shows, so I took over the gym they were running, and then I started running my own shows based off of that.
All right, and for those of you who don't know, Front Row Wrestling was a New England-based company. You ran mostly, though, in the state of New Hampshire, correct?
I did. We ran shows in Vermont and Massachusetts as well. But yeah, it was mostly New Hampshire. Again, that was part of, the charm of what I'd come up in. It's just, I love the area. I always have. I much prefer it to my own area of Massachusetts, frankly.
Don't you prefer New Hampshire to Massachusetts?
No, I
Julie?
do not. I absolutely prefer Massachusetts, but
He prefers Massachusetts. Yet he lives in New Hampshire and works in New Hampshire.
So at least we're in agreement on Disney.
yeah. I mean, why does everyone hate Mass? I don't understand that bit.
So you said you wanted to continue their style of wrestling, or is it booking? Maybe expand on that a little bit.
Well, I first started working for Jeff Costa, Lobsterman, in the mid-'90s, and he would change the name of the company several times over the course of that time, and it was ran in a very carnival style. Jeff Costa has often been called Last of the Carnies, and some people choose to think that's a complete negative, but I tend to think there's some positives to it as well. The shows were very freestyle, I always thought, and they were kind of devoid of presenting themselves any bigger than they really were. And I kind of liked that, to be honest with you. I really did. So I wanted to try and continue doing that kind of a show. And I really don't think many people were doing that. A lot of people were going towards a bigger presentation at that time. And so that's where it started, and that's where it originated from, and that's why I did it.
So you wouldn't say you were trying to be the next ECW or something like that. It's a lot. I hear that quote a lot. Like we're going to be the next. ECW.
This is no offense to any company currently running, but I'm going to pick one. I didn't even want to be the next Chaotic, to be honest with you.
All right, so you took over essentially Lobsterman's company.
Yes,
so your own now. You had been, if I'm not mistaken, you'd been his booker once or twice, correct?
Yeah, I had, as they say, I had the pencil quite a bit, which is always a little different with him because, he had, his ideas, and he was certainly, he would certainly give you ideas, but he was never a detail guy.
Yes,
like he'd come up with a match, and like a suplex challenge match. Well, what are you doing this match, Jeff? All suplexes of the entire match. How do you do a match with nothing but suplexes? Don't you know how to work? What's wrong with you? And just walk away from you. You know.
How do you win the suplex challenge?
You win it with a suplex. Or in my case, I distracted the referee and won it with a one of those bulldogs you run up the turnbuckle with, and I called it my Maverick Plex.
Julian, you're a little younger than myself and Maverick, so I don't know if you know Lobster Man or much about his company.
Actually, I do. I don't know too much about I don't know much about the company itself, but I can tell you that I actually trained with Lobster Man for a day. Brian Fury had taken a couple of students. I think it was me, Chris Gerard, or Biff Busick, Oni Lorcan, whatever you want to call him, and Greeley. And I remember going to the school. It was it Nashua?
Yes.
Yes, it's in Nashua. So we go up there. And, of course, I'm a little, taken back because I'm used to, the Chaotic Training Center. So I go up the stairs, and I see this raggedy ring in there, and I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Did you see the bread dough mixer?
I don't know.
He had two gyms, and that one used to be a bakery.
Really?
And, sometimes you had to avoid, you'd go out of the ring, and you had to avoid landing on the bread mixer.
Yeah, no. So I actually... So I ended up training there for a day. Just one day, wanted to kind of get us with a different trainer and have a different set of eyes on us and kind of give us a different perspective on wrestling. And I just remember he showed a spot. It was a simple spot. I don't remember what it was, but he showed the spot to, Oni Lorcan and Greeley. And so they do the spot, and then he comes to me and he goes, "All right, kid, do you know the spot?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know the spot." And he goes, "Oh, this guy fucking knows everything." Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that was my real hard lesson of oh, don't say I know to anything.
He's can be quite over the top sometimes, or all the time.
For those who don't know, I was actually trained by Lobster Man Jeff Costa. I mean, Maverick and Rim Morrison did most of my training in the actual ring, but
that's not what I read online.
Lobster, yes. Despite what it says online, Steve Bradley did not train me. I was trained by Jeff Costa, the Lobster Man.
Yeah, to get the kind of training, we'll call it, and I'm not belittling it at all. You had to kind of hang in there with Jeff to get all the pearls, because you're talking about a guy that wrestled in territories and stuff.
Yeah.
So the knowledge is all there. It's kind of jumbled. So
he didn't want to get in the
it comes out in
ring
spurts.
So much.
Yeah,
he sort of was the conductor outside and told us what to do and trained us. But
I actually got to experience one of his shows too, because after I'd done that, I think Crockett worked as a ref at one of his shows, and he needed someone to travel with, and he asked me what I was doing. So I ended up, and at this point, I was able to work, but I was still at that level of not going out and getting work. So Crockett had brought me, and he let Lobsterman know if you need a guy to wrestle or need a guy to work, this guy can work. I'll be honest, I don't remember much of the card, but I remember experiencing the show and how different it was from every other show. And I was laughing, I was having a good time. I actually enjoyed it. So
that was the thing. You couldn't take them, and I don't want to say you couldn't take them seriously, because Jeff would usually set up his shows where he had basically his undercard matches, which he just figured those are what they are. He would have, I like to call it the splash page. He always wanted something either extremely goofy to put on the poster. Oh, wicked, matches in 3D and
what?
Oh, God.
Matches in 3D?
I could do
another podcast.
I could do 7 hours on Jeff Costa. Matches in 3Ds and chicken coop cage matches and
amazing.
Yeah, and box of mousetrap matches and just he was crazy. That was the environment I was raised in. But then he would always want at least one. This is the match I can depend on as a wrestling match. Sometimes it would be the main event. Sometimes it wouldn't be. And I wasn't so much into the goofiest of the goofy stuff myself.
Really?
No, I wasn't. I mean, sometimes you watch me in the ring and it's out of his mind, but
but I feel like you're more like you tend to be what they call the old school guy, but like I've watched a match or two of yours, and you weren't, like you said, you weren't a gimmicky guy. You were a wrestler. So like, I don't know if like that translates to wrestling today. Like if you look at it, do you wish it was still character based and stuff, or do you just wish it was?
I mean, I'm old enough and old school enough that, I actually started testing TV basically from when it got to the early 90s on, it just became so less, they tightened up the parameters. It became a little more of a video game as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And, and it wasn't, it just wasn't my thing, I mean, I did TV matches over the years and stuff.
Yeah.
I realized the necessity for it, but I'm just not, I was never a big TV fan, really.
I got you.
The old NWA stuff and stuff and World Class I liked, but those were like more like complete shows just shown on TV.
I got you.
And I never liked that style of wrestling. So ideally for myself, it would be, a lot more on the fly and, because I like that. And that's me. And I realize that's not how it's done anymore. And oh, well.
Yeah.
But,
it's just crazy to me because when I was wrestling, I was, doing all the high flying, diving out the ring, landing on my back to the outside, doing all this dumb stuff. But as I've gotten older, and I don't know if this is just knowledge of wrestling or whatever, but I watch wrestling today, and I'm like, ugh, they're so stupid. Why are they doing all this? Why aren't they selling more? Why aren't they doing this more? Why aren't they playing more character? Because that's what's entertained me in wrestling. So I was just curious what your take was on that, just because of how you said that, Jeff was a very carny type show and so on and so forth. So
we're getting really off topic.
Yes,
so
we are.
Let's go back to Front Row Wrestling. So you've been a booker, but you hadn't run a company before, correct?
No, I ran my own. I ran one show on my own in Fitchburg, Mass. Years before that, like 91, 92. Ooh. I'm that old, Yeah, thanks for the raised eyebrows, Julian. But no, I'd never really run a company, and I kind of always wanted to give it a shot, and I didn't really care about, making a lot of money at it. It was, let's face it, was a little bit of a vanity project.
Yeah.
But, I always wanted to give it a shot.
Any trepidation about doing it? Like, maybe I'm getting over my head, or maybe this is something that's going to be a flop, or it's not worth the trouble?
There were a couple things that I worried about. I was going into an area that New Hampshire is different, where it doesn't have 20, 25 different promotions running in the same area. And I don't know if anybody's actually currently, I don't know who's running shows in New Hampshire currently right now.
There's no one actually.
There was a benefit show that Ryan Malonis ran recently, but other than that, I don't think there's anybody running New Hampshire.
Don't you need a wrestling license to run in New Hampshire?
You need to, there is a commission. They're not a pain in the ass type of commission. They're pretty easy to deal with.
Yeah.
But believe that came about because there were a lot of problems came in when guys would come in and run summer shows and things of that nature, and they'd burn halls. And
I got you.
So they already had a boxing commission, so they added wrestling onto it, and that's kind of where the commission came from.
Okay.
But it's a commission state. That really shouldn't stop anybody from really running it all that regularly. I mean, the closest thing you have to a regular show is Tommy Mack runs shows out here. Yeah. But he only runs.
It's like once a year,
two times a year. I think the most he ever did was 3.
Yeah.
Because he used to run at a place in Laconia called Tower Hill, and he does a really good job when he does promote him. He just, plain and simple, he'll tell you, I'm in this to make money, and I want to concentrate on 2 shows and not,
101.
101 and lose, lose money on every one of them.
So going into it, some people, here's the thing. When people run a wrestling company, it tends to be their mark who doesn't want other people telling them, you got to lose this guy, you got to do this. Or some people just have a love for the business, or some people want to make money. Would you say you fall under any of those three categories?
I'm sure some people think I'm a mark. I have been called it in the past.
Oh, we need names.
No, I don't need to go into specifics. I don't, it was more like, crap I'd hear uttered under somebody's breath, No, I don't really. I mean, I would have liked to make money at it. Don't get me wrong. Everybody likes money,
Yeah.
The way some of the shows lost money, you would think I don't like money, but I'm really good at. I'm really a self-deprecator, by the way, in case you can't.
I do the same thing.
But no, and my real trepidations were actually. So New Hampshire did have regular promotions, but there'd usually be one or at the most two.
Yeah.
And for quite a while, it was Jeff Costa. And then my timelines get a little screwy. I'm not great with timing. Then a series of things happened. Wolfman, Jason Sanderson, won the lottery. And then basically Jeff will always tell you he didn't buy my shows. He ran his own shows, and he paid me to help him. So, but essentially that's what happened, and he took over. And then the other thing that happened was Steve Bradley came back from the developmental system, and he ran shows, and he ran a pretty hot show there for about probably year and a half, 2 years. It was really hot.
Yeah, I think it was 2003 to 2005, I think. And the first year was extremely hot.
Yeah, it was, you had a lot of good crowds and, in small, smaller places for the most part. But, I mean, he ran the Opera House up in, oh my God, where is that? Littleton. And, he did it really good. But he hot-shotted a lot of stuff, and I've heard Brian Fury talk about this, so I don't think I'm breaking any new grounds.
No.
Brian Fury wished, he wanted to run things less hot-shotty when he took over Chaotic.
Yeah.
And I think he could have continued to hot-shot things, but he really... You would know a little better than me. I wasn't there, but he didn't turn over a lot of guys. When you hot shot a lot of things like that, you have to turn over the guys constantly.
Yeah.
Because you're doing you're doing a lot of violence sometimes. You're doing a lot of really, harder things, and that doesn't change. Your presentation doesn't change. So unfortunately, the guys have to change. And I think he ran into that out of trying to be loyal to everybody.
I think every company would run into the same guys.
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely. It's not just him, but,
that's a common problem, I think.
But they burn a little slower than he... Now, they never got hot like he did either, for the most part, except for Chaotic's been the only one that really got hot like that.
So we talk about this a lot, where I don't think people realize, you got to pay for a venue, you got to have a ring, but you owned a ring, correct?
I did, yes.
So that took a little bit.
For a while I used Jeff's, then I built my own.
Plus, you have to pay the guys. You have to do whatever advertising you're doing. Mm-hmm. I believe since you ran New Hampshire, you have to pay the athletic commission some of the gate. Right?
It's you have to pay a flat fee for a license, and then it's 5% off the gate.
So there's a lot of things that go into it. I don't think the average person always takes in mind.
Let me ask you this: did you pay for your workers' licenses?
Not usually.
Okay.
And to be frank with you, I was running enough shows, and they used to have wrestling fans that were on the wrestling commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, after a while, they didn't. I think the only wrestling fan they really had was Steve Boucher, and I think once he started segueing into other duties with the state, the commission kind of lost interest. So, a lot of times, guys would go, they'd go a while without licenses, so it wasn't a huge consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because a past podcast with Jamie Jamakowski, I had mentioned one of the deals was, a lot of the boys were kind of hot when we ran Littleton, and he told them all to pay for their licenses, and I'll tell you, all the boys were pretty hot about it because, you just assume if you have money to run a promotion, then you have money to pay for licenses.
So here's the difference between me and Jamie. He has money.
Yeah.
I don't. Jamie, you cheap bastard, you should have picked up the license.
So all this is going down, and according to my research, this could be wrong. The first ever Front Row Wrestling show was in Milford, New Hampshire in 2003. Would you say that is correct?
No. I don't think I ever ran Milford.
Amazing.
I'm trying to think where the first one was now.
Rochester?
It wasn't Rochester. I came across Rochester after a while. I ran shows. It might have been in Claremont, New Hampshire, at the Zotto. That was one that Jeff had run several times before, and I just knew they were wrestling accessible. So that's where I went, and he used to draw some pretty decent crowds there.
Yeah, I'm going to read this quote to you right here and get your opinion on it. Hold on a second.
Okay.
I just lost it, but...
Into the mic, Tarzan. Into the mic.
Sorry. I'm trying to do two things at once. Yeah. Where is... I was just looking at it. Hold on. Here we go. Although the promotion struggled financially during its first year, partly due to Scott Dupree's inexperience as a promoter. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt. Yeah, I would definitely, it's funny we're talking about this because I would never count myself as a great promoter, or maybe not even a good one, I was okay. It was decent, but, I was part of the concept was flawed to begin with because I wanted to run something that I was so familiar with that I was running in an area that I didn't live in, and I think at least when you start, you have to do that because you can't, it's hard to personally oversee everything if you're not within a stone's throw of it, And I mean, that's been true for Jamie. I mean, really, he was in the Lowell area, where he started off predominantly. I mean, Sheldon with NECW, he's in that Boston area, so that's where he's run. And, EWA had ran pretty hot there for a while themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, and even Steve, when he came home, he was running New Hampshire. That's where he lived. That's where he came from.
Yeah.
I was running too far away, to start with anyways.
It's funny you say you didn't think of yourself as that great of a promoter. Polar opposites. Do you remember an earlier episode with the owner of Chaotic really puts himself over as a great promoter?
We thought he was the greatest promoter on earth.
Okay.
So,
Jamie's good. Don't get me wrong.
You worked for him, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I like Jamie. I always get along with
I do
Jamie,
too.
actually.
I like Jamie a lot.
so do you have any memories of that very first show you did?
Oh, God.
Or did you try to delete it from your memory for the rest of
No, I wouldn't say I'm trying to delete it from my memory. It's just, it's not just, it's not because, it's not the promotion that I forget the sequencing of. It's because, Christ, I wrestled for combined about 25 years. So, I mean, first it were just so many matches over the years in so many different places for so many different people. And then, a lot of it was done on a rush and, let's face it, I've spent a lot of time landing on my head over the years, so, I've all the while maintaining a physical job outdoors and
roofing, right?
Yeah. So the sun got to my brain too, as well. So, and there's been a lot of operations and stuff. So some of the stuff becomes kind of jumbled. So remembering from the first show, I can say this, and I believe, like I said, I believe it was in Claremont, New Hampshire. What I remember most about, not so much the first show, but I remember as I ran Claremont, New Hampshire, there's a river out there that flooded, and wiped out the community. So while Jeff was drawing pretty good up there, when I started going up there, it was like a financially decimated area. So, I did okay the first couple times, and then just everything went, it went south quick. And that really wasn't my fault. I couldn't do anything about, with the finances of the area. Yeah. But I also remember the hall degrading over the years. I went from calling it the Zotto to the Fruit Fly Arena, because you would go in the dressing room and you literally had to wave your hand in front of your face. There were so many fruit flies in it at one point. When it was that bad, I said, I'm not running here anymore. I can't do this.
After that first show, were you like, all right, this is for me, I want to do this? Or were you like, oh man, what am I getting myself into?
No, I was all in. I didn't expect to make money my first show out anyways, But yeah, I was all in. And you know what? Now that I think of it, it was definitely Claremont. It was the first show. I used a lot of the Jeff holdovers and stuff, and I liked it. I really did. I really enjoyed doing it.
Well, I mean, Front Row Wrestling you might not have heard of, but I'm looking at your talent roster. I mean, just to name some of the few, you people that came to Front Row Wrestling: current Ring of Honor superstar Brian Malonis,
yep,
current WWE superstar, one half of the Viking Warriors, Ivar, also known as Handsome Johnny.
Yes.
We have Matt Taven, current Ring of Honor superstar. Mm-hmm. We have
actually
This is according to your Wikipedia page.
He didn't write it.
Extremely informative Wikipedia page.
I can see where that would get thought of, actually, because after I started segueing away from the shows, Jeff actually came back in and started ring shows, and he had Taven on one of his shows.
Okay.
So that's close to the truth.
We have,
Taylor Hendricks?
Taylor Hendricks, Ring of Honor.
Yeah, that would have been another one of Jeff's shows.
We have one half of the WWE tag team, the Heartthrobs, Antonio.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Former NXT star Mickey Keegan, also known as Max Bauer.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did use Max.
Former TNA Knockout Roxy Laveau.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And podcast host Tarzan Taylor.
That's true. Podcast host Tarzan Taylor was on the show. We're mentioning superstars. You shouldn't be putting mine in.
Sorry, pal.
According to this, former Ring of Honor wrestler Bob Evans.
I am trying to remember if I actually had Bob on a show. I probably did. I get so many. You end up having so many people on these shows. Because I was running about 18 a year, so that's. For a guy with a full-time job and trying to do it, pretty much on his own, but with some help from a lot of guys, that's quite a few shows, actually.
So we also have a current WWE superstar Tommaso Ciampa as well.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yes.
So with this talent pool, did you ever have trouble drawing houses, or?
Oh, constantly.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it just lack of promotion, or?
Well, these guys weren't famous at the time,
Okay.
So.
No, I know, but they were decent workers and stuff.
Yeah, they were getting whatever I paid everybody else.
Yeah, no, I get that.
I don't think Ivar or whatever I call them is coming in for $30 for trans.
I feel like if you promote it the correct way, and I know social media wasn't big back then, but I didn't know, did you poster or did you try to do word of mouth? I posted. I did a few TV ads. Okay.
I tried. Now you're right. That's one of the things that have changed tremendously over the years, where social media was, a huge thing, but it wasn't before.
Yeah.
What you had were message boards.
Yeah.
And
Burning Hammer?
Yeah, I did try that early on, and fairly okay. I write fairly okay for a dumb old roofer. So, and
Wait, you roof?
Oh yeah,
I heard that.
Yeah.
So I know that obviously, with the Burning Hammer and stuff, you used promotion, and then you did some postering. Do you think it was just the town itself that was dead? That it just, because certain towns I feel like don't draw wrestling well, and certain towns do.
So I had poor timing.
Okay.
I had very poor timing. Like I said, Claremont went kaput really quick because the area was financially destroyed and really decimated. You know,
So at
I used to have people that actually showed up for shows looking for free tickets because they were broke and they wanted to see wrestling. And I let that go on for a little while, and then eventually I was like, hey, you know what? I'm broke too. But there was that. Some people like, you know, when we talk about it with some people like to say that, you know, it was because Steve had been running the WFA and because he had hot-shotted, and I never really believed that. There might have been a little of that there was some burnout in the towns.
I got you.
I don't really believe that totally. You know, I don't think that cost me that much. You know, a lot of it was just simply, you know, I was just, again, too far away to babysit these things, and frankly, the style of show that I wanted to run, that's what I liked, and that was a mistake as well.
Yeah,
that's not what people were wanting to start. We're starting to not want to see at that point. They were used to a Steve Bradley style show.
Yeah.
Steve was the first one who came in and really did like video screens and stuff like that. He was ahead of his time in this area.
Yeah.
And somebody coming to my show, it was like totally reversed. It was, here's a ring. It's in the center of the hall, and sit your ass down and watch your wrestling.
So it was like the Attitude Era was kind of growing, and Steve adapted that and then took that on the independent scene, and you were still kind of sticking with that old school Carney-ish type.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't quite as, you know, I never did anything quite as goofy as Jeff.
I gotcha.
I certainly had my
fair share.
Certainly, yeah. Tony Spencer. Oh, that poor kid.
You know,
I made him do so many dumb things over the years.
I love Tony.
So this is a little bit of a long-winded story. On my this is probably the goofiest thing I ever did on my shows. There was a guy wrestling, and I don't know if he's still going. He used to be One Warrior Nation, and he was an Ultimate Warrior ripoff, and he wasn't good.
Just like the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah. So I said, well, Tony's not any good. So, but Tony had no real body to speak of. He was in terrible shape, but he's not built like a wrestler. Let's put it that way. So I decided it was my fault. Have I got an idea? So I took an old pair of my red trunks and I put them in him. Okay. And then we tied no-pest strips on his arms and his legs. And then we took a Sharpie and put the muscles in to his body. And okay, I got to do the details on your back. And I wrote, I suck on his back. And we sent him out there as the alternate warrior. And it was... we debuted him with a political debate with Joey Eastman.
Oh, that must have been fantastic.
That was definitely the goofiest thing I ever did. Yeah, and it was pretty entertaining, I must admit. But then they had a match, and that was not entertaining at all.
So the bell rang, and that was it.
Yeah. That was one thing Jeff used to say. Is like, my mistake was putting him in the ring after all that crap.
All right, so we're going to take a little break.
Okay.
But when we come back, we're going to have more with Maverick Wild. We're going to talk more about the trials and tribulations of not only booking, owning, and wrestling on your own company, as well as we're going to talk about the one thing I think you did that was actually ahead of its time.
Okay.
When we come back on Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way.
You hear about chaotic wrestling's past on Let the Chaos Begin. But if you want to see its present and future, then go to Chaotic Wrestling Live. You can see all the Chaotic Wrestling action live and in person across New England. Go to chaoticwrestling.com/tickets to see the current schedule of shows and to purchase tickets. It's all the action of Chaotic Wrestling live at chaoticwrestling.com.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
All right, and we're back with Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way. My name is Matt Spectro, a.k.a. Tarzan Taylor, and I am here with my fellow host Julian Starr.
I feel like I have nothing really to add to this podcast because I wasn't really around when Front Row Wrestling was it wasn't operating too much when I was around. I wish it was because
More fucking old guy jokes, thanks.
but I mean like I really wish it was around when I was around because it sounds like it would have been a fun promotion to work for.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're here with Maverick Wild, the owner and operator of Front Row Wrestling, and that's the subject of our podcast today.
Is it?
It is.
I don't know how many times you mentioned it.
Don't sell yourself short, Julian. You're a hell of a contributor to this show.
Oh, contributor?
Contributor. Yeah.
Not contributor?
Yeah, like that game, we do the Konami code.
Contra?
All right, Maverick, we're back talking about Front Row Wrestling. Now, you not only were the owner, you were the promoter, you were the booker.
Yep.
And you actually were talent as well. So did you ever at any point find this overwhelming, say maybe I shouldn't wrestle on the show because I got too much going on?
So, no. You know why? Because I think unlike a lot of places, I kept it very loose. Like Jeff was pretty loose, but he's personally kind of an intense guy,
Yeah.
And I can be intense when it comes to, okay, this is my match. I have to make sure this is good. However, my surrounding environment, I always operated a lot better if there wasn't a lot of yelling and screaming and, huge tight guidelines to follow and so that's kind of how I kept the environment of it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was never felt overwhelmed at all, even though, on top of everything you said, I also built the rings.
Yeah.
I maintained the rings. I know some people think they probably weren't all that well maintained, but I maintained them. I trailered them up to the shows. I set the rings up. I helped set the rings up and stuff. So, and I never felt overwhelmed. I mean, I was in a lot better shape at that point too, so I had a lot of energy. So I would never really get burnt out on it. So,
as a talent on the show, did you ever fear that, like, if you'd put yourself in the main event or put yourself over for your championship, that the boys were going to think, or just people in general were going to think you were? Because I feel like this is a normal thought. When you own your own promotion, you put yourself over in the main event, you're immediately a mark for yourself and all this jazz. Did you ever have that in the back of your head if you made those decisions?
Not so much. Not so much worrying about thinking if people thought I was a mark if I put myself in the main events.
Okay.
And typically I would, if I did, I'd be on the losing end of it generally. I mean, I started with myself as a champion, but as I got that off of me very quickly. And then I would put myself in a position if I did main events where it was to get somebody else over. And then, if anything, and this isn't downplaying some of the guys I used, I probably downplayed myself a little too much at times because, I don't speak in glowing terms of myself, but I know I was a pretty good wrestler at one point, and at that point I still had a little bit of youth left, so I could still go pretty decently.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see the case for both arguments. Some people would say, he just wants to be the top guy. But at the same time, because I was a booker as well. I don't know if I ever mentioned that.
Oh, were you?
I was a booker, but I was not. I was very minimal talent when I was the booker. It was too much for me. Occasionally.
Don't let him sell it short. He was an MMA star, and then he transitioned over.
But the other argument I could say, it's your wrestling company. It's your money. You have to make your top guy someone is faithful to your company, someone that will wave the flag for your company, someone you can trust. So I could see the other argument of putting yourself in that position because you're not going anywhere. You can trust yourself. You're always going to promote Front Row Wrestling. And I would say that for anybody who is talent as well as the owner of a company.
I never really, I never thought of it that way. I never really did because that was part of the advantage of having a loose environment like that. Guys didn't feel pressured. They didn't feel like they were being. If you came to wrestle for me and you felt like you were being held down, leave. There's other places to work. That was pretty much the predominant attitude, and it was like that was a
it's
jerk
funny
about it.
You say that because a lot of people sometimes would complain to me about front row wrestling. I'm not going to name names because
Why? Because you're a wuss?
No, I just if people aren't here to speak up for themselves, I tend not to bring it up. But I would always say to them, I'd say, you may be right, but Maverick's not forcing you to work there. Like, you can leave at any time. If you're not happy, why are you still there?
Yeah.
Like,
You have your mindset for that, even like just everywhere. Every time I've ever heard you, you're like, you're not forced to be here, so just make a decision and leave if you're unhappy. To play on what you just said, I've always liked working for promotions that ran it like you just said. Just relax, go have fun, and you want to make the show good, but at the same time, you don't want everyone to feel like this is a burden.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I probably didn't realize some of that was being said. I know some of that was being said. However, I can be quite oblivious sometimes because, again, I want to be kind of loose, and I don't want to be weighed down by, what this guy said. What this guy said.
Yeah.
I don't care what this guy said. People tell you, people, they want to talk behind my back. They won't say it to my face. I think completely the opposite. If you're not going to say it to my face, you don't care that. It's not that important to you.
Yeah.
It really isn't. You're just bitching to bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
well, I mean, every talent wants to. Obviously, you want to go and you want to see your name on the card with, I don't know, like John Walters or like the best talented guy on the show. But I mean, if you're any good, you should just be able to have a fun match with no matter who you're on the other side of the ring with.
Well, that's the whole deal. If you go out there and have good matches, you should progress on the cards, and I get that, I don't know if this is true for some of the unnamed sources, but if you weren't really all that great, I think they'd get mixed in a lot more, but what do you expect?
I think that's just a form of insecurity. Like when people feel like they're not doing their job or they can't do it as well as others, that the only thing you can do is get defensive and bitch and complain and, make it not so much about you, but about everything around you.
Well, Jerry Lawler wrote in his book that every wrestler thinks there's a world champion or a massive draw inside him if somebody just uses them correctly.
Yeah, that's true.
And you need a lot of people probably need that confidence, which is not actually confidence. It's actually a little bit of a self-esteem problem sometimes.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, over the years, talent-wise, you've worked with guys who grew to be future superstars, all the way down to guys who were lucky to even ever get booked on a show. Would you say anybody you found difficult to work with on a business level or a wrestling level?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. There were people I got in the ring with that, on a business level, I'm trying to think. Not really on a business level, but I'd been around long enough, and at that point I knew who I could work with and who I couldn't. I wasn't going to invite what I thought were big problems in, because again, I didn't want to stress over it that much. I mean, over the years, I got in the ring with people that were hard to move, one name that's fairly big that comes up, it will always be Matt Stryker. I had one of the worst matches of my entire life with Matt Stryker. It was my fault because I made the mistake. Said, I've heard of this guy. He must be okay. Boy, was I fucking wrong. That guy was the drizzling shit. Like, it's and I joke with Tony Spencer, and I downplay him. He has abilities that you can tap, that you can actually, it's a bit of a smoke and mirrors kind of deal.
Yeah.
But and he knows this. I'm not telling him anything I wouldn't tell him to his face.
Yeah.
But he does have abilities you could get around if you know what you're getting yourself into. In the case of like a Matt Stryker, I thought I was getting something different, and I thought I was getting one thing. I get something completely different.
So as an owner and a promoter for Front Row Wrestling, you never actually had like any talent that consistently every time you're like, this is what you're doing tonight, they're like, I don't want to do that, let's change it. You didn't have a guy that was, because Tarzan booked, and Tarzan always had one or two guys that were always every little thing, you fight them every inch of the way. You never had someone who was just difficult to deal with, but they produced well out there, so you continued to use them.
I can, maybe a motto a little,
Okay.
you know, but not even, you know, and not to any like great extent.
Not to a headache extent.
No,
Not to a I don't want to concede this guy today.
No, never to that
Okay.
extent, because I didn't want people like that around me. And I think the benefit to being seen as half crazed is maybe people are a little less apt to want to
Mess with you.
yeah, you know, they don't think you're like, you know, Ken Shamrock or you know, some UFC fighter, but they're like, I'm not exactly sure how he's going to react to this. So
I relate that to everyone is going to be a little off topic, but to relate to that, you're 100% right. It's all about demeanor. I mean, everyone had told me how crazy Tommaso Ciampa was until I got on the road with him, and I was like, this dude's really cool.
no, he's
and
not
relaxed.
crazy.
No.
He's personally very tense.
Yes,
but he's not
that's what I was
crazy.
saying. He's tense, and people confuse that with crazy. And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know.
No,
it
he's
is what
not
it is.
crazy.
But I can see that people on your show as a promoter and a booker, they're like, I want to say something, but I think Mav's out of his mind, so
Yeah.
I don't want him to punch me in the head.
It was, it was helpful, or set them on fire or whatever. You know,
good.
Well, some companies like that I know of personally, Chaotic Wrestling, New England Championship Wrestling, even Jeff's company, sometimes would rely on somebody else doing the book for them.
Yes.
Did you ever consider that, or you just like, it's not that hard, I can just handle it myself?
I would have considered it. But yeah, I mean, the thing was, I also knew it was my kind of vision of what things, the way I wanted things done. So while I never really fell into that. I'm the promoter, so I'm the top talent here, and that's it. What I would say is, you know, it was like I did have a certain way I wanted things done, and I'm not sure that a lot of, because I was getting older and wrestlers were getting younger at that point, and I'm not sure they were actually familiar with what I was trying to do for the most part, and I don't know that it would have worked. So that was kind of why it stayed that way.
I'm going to ask you a fun question that just popped into my head. Is there anyone on your show that you ever felt like you had to use because of a friendship or for any reason whatsoever? You felt like you had to use, but they were just the shits and you really wanted to just get rid of them? But you know what I mean? It's like that person that
No,
I really
no.
want to fire them out the door. But
No. You know,
Really?
I bust on Tony, but, you know, I always wanted to use Tony because Tony greatly amused me, and he could be very amusing in the ring. And I think because part of the thing with my shows is, you know, even though I segued off of, you know, a lot of some of just more carnival aspects,
Yeah.
I was also really heavily into actually like real like wrestling matches.
Yeah.
I had things like you couldn't grab the ropes more than 3 times, and it was a disqualification if
Oh,
you're
wow.
trying to break holds and stuff like that. And, you know, I know Dan Tanaka loved that, you know.
because Tarzan, you specifically had a couple people that you would have fired out the door when you were booking, right?
There was a plethora of people in Chaotic that I would have said, if I owned the company, I would have said, hit the bricks. I have you can go anywhere else but here. No interest.
You can see why I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
I figure other promoters
But
may have
unlike
this.
Maverick, I was the booker. I didn't own the company. I didn't sign the check. So it's
true.
like I'm doing a job for somebody else's company to make their
Exactly.
better.
You weren't bringing them in.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
or maybe they would take your suggestion, hey, we should bring this guy in and I can do this with him. you
Yeah.
know. But I was bringing everybody in, and I was, you know, an owner who doesn't have to book them at that point.
I gotcha.
It's different. You know,
Okay.
it's like they don't have to deal with their personality.
That makes sense.
The booker does. Well, I was the booker. I was bringing people in to my own company, so I was like, I don't want these headaches. You know, I don't know.
That makes
you know?
sense.
I don't know. There were guys that did things that pissed me off.
Yeah.
there were a couple of guys I did fire over the years. One of them being Kid Crazy, who was actually one of my better friends now. Yeah. He spit on somebody in a crowd, and I was like, no, we don't do that. And
Yeah.
goodbye. And you know. And I think I actually did it on an email or online, right on the website.
Good.
While I was out, I was pissed. I was really mad.
I
you know?
would be too.
Yeah, because he was he cut it. He was really good, but he really cut it really close with
Yeah.
some of the ways he worked the crowd, and I wasn't going to put up with that. And you know, and then a few people, you know, who were really good friends with him, you know, left over it. And, you know,
course.
but oh well, you know,
Yeah.
you're not always going to agree with me, and I wasn't terribly afraid to make
Yeah.
strong decisions.
I
You know,
gotcha.
it's I did know that, well, I'm in charge. I try and keep it loose, but I still am in charge. And there's only some things I'm not going to tolerate. So
Makes sense.
So you ran a lot of places, but Rochester, New Hampshire was like your home base, like your ECW arena, so to speak. Like that was the place you ran
What a
the most.
reference.
yeah, yeah.
Would you, and I worked for you at that time, so I saw there you did a lot more of like kind of, I wouldn't say you were doing storylines, but you would do more that would lead to the next show.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
Is that something that happened organically, or you were like, well, I don't really want to do it, but if I got to draw these people back.
So originally that was all supposed to happen in Claremont. But
Yeah.
Claremont, we already went through that. So I always wanted, one or two places that I could do that with, set things up for the next show, or even set them, even occasionally set them up for a couple of shows, I like that.
Not to interrupt, it was the Rochester American Legion Hall.
Yes, yes, it was. So yeah, I always wanted to do that. As far as a booker and stuff like that, I always thought it was halfway decent at that. The promotion, the promoting end of it, I was a little, that was where I was a little sketchier.
Well, it says here, and I don't know if this is true, that you ran into some difficulty with the Rochester City Council.
That is absolutely true. The first time I went to run in Rochester, apparently somebody had come through, and I think they ran. There's an opera house in Rochester, I think, I think it's an old opera house. It's actually part of the town facilities.
I think you're right.
And then I don't know if it happened there or on some kind of fair date. It probably happened at their opera house. And rumor has it was Mike Sparta, but he somehow burnt the town. And after that, what happened was Rochester made this rule that you had to pay, you needed a detail, which that's fine. And you actually needed the town council or the select, I think it's a council up there, that they had to vote on every time you wanted to run a show. Oh. And I didn't know that when I went in there. New Hampshire's very strange where they have the towns have a lot of different regulations when it comes to running any type of entertainment. Laconia, you go into Laconia, you have to buy a separate entertainment license from the town. I mean, that's a tourist trap up there anyways.
Yeah.
And, like any band that goes up there, somebody has to float, a $50 fee to the town, or they used to have to. But yeah, I did. So I didn't know any of these regulations, and I'm running up there, and we're getting ready for our first show. We had about 150 tickets sold. So I was like, well, this is going to be okay. And then literally about an hour before I was leaving with the ring from my house, I got a cease and desist letter delivered by a police officer that the town of Rochester had faxed down that day. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And I had to call Stephen Marriott, who did a lot of the front work for me. I said, I hate to do this to you, but not only do I have to postpone the show, but you have to go to the arena and tell everybody that this is happening, and you have to give them their money back, because he was actually handling the ticket sales at that point too. So, but the hall was too, and the hall was not happy that they had to give money back. But I was like, listen, I'm going to clear this up, and it wasn't. After that, it wasn't a big deal. I had to go up before the town council, and I had to write a letter, and which I was good at, and and they just they let it happen after that. But it was a complicated little town to run. Actually, it was an expensive little town to run.
When you hit roadblocks and stuff like this, was there ever any a time that you just kind of told yourself, like, why am I still doing this? I should just be working. Like, I should just be a wrestler. Promoting's not worth it. Just because a lot of that stuff, I'll tell you, like, if promoting wasn't your first dream, I personally probably would have just been like, I'm not doing this. This is my personal opinion, but I don't know if that ever crossed your mind. Like, I should just go back to just working.
Maybe a little.
Okay.
Maybe a little occasionally, but not really. Because in working for my father, and when I would work in his office, and the roadblocks we ran into, just from a contracting end, I could always relate it to that, and I just used to look at it like, well, running nearly the kind of stuff I did, here. But then again, it wasn't, my father made money and I didn't. So yeah. But you'd run into something like that. Jesus fucking Christ. But, but you just absorb it and go on,
Yeah, because I was just going to cover. It says here that they ended up settling and giving you a special permit to continue.
Yeah, well, that was, it wasn't so much settling. That was just their arrangement. It's just I know Steve ran into this one time in Laconia. Jeff ran into Laconia one time too, and then Steve ran into it. And I know because they called me complaining about it, thinking Jeff called the town, and that was a whole different. That was a whole different ball of wax. But you don't expect those kind of things, really. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
It only happened really once to me in regards to that. I mean, other roadblocks. I remember one time we had a show in Claremont, and it was actually one of the guys I was training broke his ankle. And the show was scheduled, and I said, "Well, the hell with it. We're turning it into a complete benefit for this kid." And so about 200 people showed up. There you go. The one time, when I draw good in Claremont, I still don't make any money. But so somebody hit a telephone pole or a transformer in town, and then all the power went out, and they didn't have backup generators apparently. And like everybody's in the dark, and I'm trying to keep everybody in their seats because I don't want them wandering. If they wanted to leave, fine, but I don't want them wandering around and crashing into each other and getting hurt, and then potentially me getting sued. So that was a pain. I had guys out in the ring performing by cell phone light, just doing comedy. And Johnny Vegas being one of them, and Dr. Reginald Heresy, and he run into some odd snags when you're doing that.
Because I was working for you when you did the Rochester. I really thought those were fun shows. There was never any pressure. There was never any. You draw a decent crowd. It was a return crowd, so they were familiar with everybody. I mean, we weren't like packing the house, but it was. No,
the last couple they kind of dropped off at the end, and then Jeff took over, and it really didn't draw well. And that was. I mean, as old-fashioned as I was, Jeff was even more old-fashioned, and I was trying to run a modified version of his show, and he was trying to run his show, and it just wasn't going to fly at that point. But yeah, did okay up there.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, that Jeff did come back at one point.
Yes.
And was working with you, but you didn't he wasn't becoming a partner. He was just talent at that point, correct?
Yeah, he came up and worked a couple shows for me. And then a couple of things happened. My father's roofing business was taking the tank.
Yeah.
And so, that was how I was financing my shows through that. And it was like, well, I'm not going to have that anymore. I kind of have to get out of this at this point because I can't afford to lose. As much as I enjoy it, I can't afford to lose, a couple $100, every weekend I run, or I couldn't even afford to take that chance. But, I was financially into, I wasn't the promoter, but I financially was into a few promotions over the years. When the EWA moved down here, when Dr. Reginald Heresy was running it, I was originally financially linked into that. And we actually ran one show together in Gardner, Massachusetts that did pretty well. And then after that, I was actually tied in with Liberty States Wrestling financially with Todd. And I got to be frank with you, that was really the only time I consistently made money.
Really?
Yeah, as I wasn't really I wouldn't call me a promoter. I was a money man at that point. But it was the only time I really saw a return on the investment. But by that point, things had really tanked at my father's company, and I was like, I can't afford to take any risks at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I didn't know that you were had merged with Liberty States.
Yeah, for about 8 months. Yeah, we did pretty well actually.
I thought it was just all Todd and maybe his family or something. I didn't realize that he had.
No, I came in and it was a financial guy.
Wow.
And yeah.
I mean, if you made money, then good for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, Todd's kind of. He's kind of controversial, you know.
No.
Yes, very. But I've always gotten along with Todd, and I never had a problem with the guy, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, making a little money, it probably helped smooth it over. But,
Yeah.
you know, but I never had a problem with the guy. And, you know, yeah, I was definitely tied in with that.
Well, we're trying to get him on the show at some point as well, so we can discuss Liberty States Wrestling.
Todd, answer me. Get on the show, please.
Don't be afraid.
Todd's had a rough history with interviews over the years.
Him, he's just like Buddy Romano, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, Buddy had a very good interview I heard one time. It was very honest, very frank, but it doesn't make him any less controversial. It's just, he's more out there than Todd. Yeah, and I like Buddy. I really do.
Yeah.
Why do I like all the guys nobody else likes? What's wrong with me? I think this says a lot about me.
Well, on that note, that was actually my next question. I kind of would ask this of anybody. A lot of times we run companies, and you find this very common more with a booker, I would say. Like NECW would be a fine example of that. A new booker comes in, and then the talent roster changes to all their best friends. Mm-hmm. Would you say you ever fell into that trap of you were surrounding yourself with guys that were just your friends, and maybe they weren't always the smartest business decision, or is it just a coincidence? Or, I mean, how would you describe how that unfolded for you?
Well, I was training guys at the same time.
Yeah.
So out of that, so I used a lot of the guys that I was training, and that's where guys like Joe Puffer came out. I mean, Joe Puffer originally was wrestling on Jeff's shows.
Christian Angers.
Yeah, Christian Angers. Excuse me. Christian Angers and a few other guys, and yeah, I mean, I suppose I fell into that to some degree. I mean, the thing is, when you run, I wouldn't call it. I ran a gym. I don't call it a school. I ran a gym, but I essentially was training people and trying to make them better, and so I think when you have that arrangement, you tend to use people out of your school,
It's smart business, I think.
Well, it is. I mean, it's frankly, you get your built-in ring crew and your built-in street team, and that's kind of how that's supposed to work. And I know that's followed in a lot of different places. Jesus, what was the question again?
Well, at level, a lot of times it comes, you get the accusation, well, such and such is only booked because he's friends with, in this case, Maverick, and he wouldn't be booked otherwise.
Yeah, but that wasn't true either, because I was booking a lot of different people outside it, and I always knew, I had to keep it like a lot of places that run with schools adjoined to them. I had to keep those guys the absolute strongest, like Shane Sharp, who was trained elsewhere, but he trained at my school, and he was really good. And it was like, well, this is a guy that I've got to use well. But then I also use guys like Stephen Marriott, and the reason I started using Stephen Marriott was about 5'2", maybe a little taller.
Both ways.
And he was pretty wide. He wouldn't have any. He's lost a lot of weight himself recently, but the reason I used him, he would manage for me. He was always there for ring crew and always there to push posters and always there to do stuff like that. And he wanted to be a wrestler. I'd look at him and go, no fucking way, But so one night, and he kept being insistent. I know Christian Angers was sliding some training on his way. So one night he managed for me, and he was up on the ring apron, and he got his foot tied up in the apron rope.
Yeah.
Fell down on his knee. He went up for 2 more matches after he fell in the concrete, and then he asked, well, my knee kind of hurts. Do you mind if I don't do ring crew tonight? Yeah, go ahead. Good guy, So he gets in his standard transmission car with his knee in shambles and drives it home. He goes to the hospital the next day. He broke his kneecap in 5 places. It was in 5 separate pieces. And I was like, you're too tough not to be a wrestler. To hell with it,
So when, as being a promoter, booker, and all that stuff, did you see this? Did you see this random influx of people wanting to be your friend all of a sudden?
There was some of that. Yes, there was.
I'm sure there was. You want to name names?
I don't know that. See, the thing with those kind of random kind of people is usually they don't turn out to be all that much. So I would name names. I'm not afraid to name names.
Yeah.
I've brought some up in good light, and I've brought a few up in bad lights, and some in different lights. But
Not memorable enough to bring up.
No, but there was definitely a decent amount of that.
I'm sure.
They usually would, oh, Mav, I remember you.
Yeah.
And I'd
How you doing? How you been, pal?
sometimes I'd keep it. I wouldn't say it out loud, and sometimes I would. Who the fuck are you?
Oh God.
Well, let's go over the list here. The towns that I could find that you've booked shows in, which some we've mentioned: Claremont,
Yes.
Rochester,
Yes.
Winchendon, Massachusetts,
Yes.
Leominster, Massachusetts.
It was actually Fitchburg.
Okay.
Actually, it's right on the line. But yeah.
And I believe, did you do Exeter, New Hampshire? Am I getting that wrong? I
don't
remember a show where the locker room was downstairs, and it was upstairs.
That was Keene. That was Keene, New Hampshire.
It was. I just remember it was Dr. Heresy versus Antonio Thomas, and the match went less than a minute.
That was in Haverhill, Mass.
Haverhill, Mass. All right,
Yes.
that's where that was.
Where at? Because I'm from Haverhill.
Oh, it was this tiny, tiny little place. I mean, if you put 60 people in there, that was capacity.
What year was this?
Tiny. Oh,
I don't know. I just remember he had the headlock on, and he said, "Have you had enough?" And Hersey said, "Yes." And the ref rang the bell, and that was
So the referee was Dan Tanaka, and he knew I was like uber serious about the actual wrestling end of things. So I know where that came from. Somebody said, "I give up," and he said, "That's it. You're done."
That is amazing.
And I'm sure he said, and I'm sure they might have yelled at him, and I'm sure he walked away and went.
That is absolutely amazing.
And I ran White River Junction as well,
Okay.
at least once.
So, any ones that stick out better, you liked better than others? Any that you absolutely hated and would never do again, or would you say it's across the board? Kind of.
I didn't put Ringe in there because I never drew in Ringe anything at all.
Oh wait, yeah, Ringe. I remember that too.
Yeah,
You
so it was
said
a
that.
catering hall, and
Yes.
it was miserable. It was just terrible. And I'd run in Winchendon and do okay. So I which is literally the next town over.
Yeah.
I would actually. Winchendon was a deal I had where they had a summer solstice fair, and I would actually run some free matches during the day, and then they had an interior hall that was huge, and they would give it to me for free that night, and then I would run rent-free, and I actually drew okay at the same time, so I actually made money on those shows. But that hall wasn't available all the time, so I figured, well, I'll just run this hall in Ringe, New Hampshire, which is 3 miles away, not even. There are people at the time would have 15 people rattling around in that building. Like, this is the shit. I'm never coming back here. And then, of course, there's Claremont and all the black flies and the asbestos on the walls. No, we're done.
Funny story about that Winchendon show. I wrestled Shane Sharp at the fair.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, all those kids have those inflatable tomahawks. Why don't you grab me and have the kids hit me with the tomahawks? So we go right to the front row. He's like, oh, hit him with that. Holds me back. Kid punches me right in the balls.
You see, yeah, my wife is actually here. She's going, I remember that. But, actually my funniest story from that was I have two. So the first year we did it, there's a parade too. So I put all the wrestlers in the parade. I was in the truck, and I had the baby faces in the truck, and I had the heels following us behind us. And then when the parade was over, I took off on the heels and I had to walk all the way back to the hall. But they were not happy.
Great rib.
And then the other one was Christian Angers was wrestling a guy named Dan Thunder. We used to call him Caveman Dan.
Caveman Dan.
Caveman Dan, man. Yeah, Caveman Dan liked his weed and way too much. And Caveman Dan was not a talented wrestler at all. Nice guy, pretty brain dead sometimes. And to prove it, I mean, it's probably no secret. You could look it up that wrestlers work on the left side. They take an arm, they work the left arm. They work a headlock. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, obviously, but maybe for, somebody who watches this, they don't quite know that. So he's in the ring with Christian Angers, and they're doing the match, and Christian's trying to pull it out of him, and Dan's kind of hard to move around the ring. And then at one point, about 2 minutes into it, Christian told him, all right, take my arm. And Dan made the mistake of saying, which one? Christian Angers, who was one of the calmest people I ever knew in my life, beat the ever-loving shit out of Dan Thunder that night, that day, in broad daylight.
That is amazing.
Now, I teased it before the break. We were going to discuss the one way you're a little bit ahead of your time. Now, granted, you're probably not the only person who did this. And I don't know the date, but you main evented in Rochester, New Hampshire, Mistress Belmont versus Vanity Vixen, and I believe a no disqualification match.
Yeah, I did.
You main evented a women's match well before the WWE revolution, well before I believe the TNA knockouts became a thing. Now, granted, I'm sure you're not the only guy in the world who did that, but it was a little bit ahead of your time, I think. Did you? How did that unfold?
I just wanted to do it. I never really wanted to stick to. I wanted to stick to a kind of a tried and true formula for wrestling, but I didn't want that to be restricted to sex. It's not. This is going to start off sounding awful. It's not their fault they were born women. Okay? And so we didn't talk about this before. As soon as I came into my head, I used to be terrible about anything that would come to my mind.
Yeah.
It would come out of my mouth.
No filter.
And I would be like, I would always look at it like when I was saying it, I knew I shouldn't be saying it. I always thought of it like a rope that was coming out of your hands too fast. I'm trying to grab the words coming back. But now I do think a little better about it. So now when I say something and can explain it a little better at the very least. It wasn't their fault they were born women. The problem was, and I've always thought that women are, especially in the, so it was more of a novelty before the 90s, before the mid 90s, and then it turned into a total sex show. Mm-hmm. And I used to look at it and go, I would never want my daughter involved in this.
Yeah.
And now there were people that are trying to present themselves in a more serious light. And Kathy did, Mistress Belmont, sorry, and Vanity Vixen did. And they worked hard, and they really did. And, Vanity had some talent initially, and it took some training. And I have no problem saying Kathy was really rough at first, but she worked very, 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 very hard to get better. And just like the hard work is there. You deserve to be top of something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my crappy little show, but yeah, you deserve that, and I'm going to do that. And that was one of the few things I actually heard any rumblings ever about, because I remember I hate intergender matches. I don't like them normally.
You and me both.
But
All three of us hate them.
But I did one with rumblings. I hate rumblings, and we're getting off track here. Okay. You said, if you're not happy, leave.
Yeah.
So I was working for Sheldon Goldberg in NECW, and I had worked with a bunch of the guys, and a lot of the guys were coming out of Bob schools. Here's where you hear negative stuff, okay? Yeah. And the bitching that I heard on these shows was unfucking believable. Oh my God. There's just the nonstop complaining about how the shows were set up and promoted. And, oh my God. So there were two people left that hadn't, there was one male left I really hadn't wrestled with a lot on the shows, and it was Antonio Thomas. And I knew I was coming into a series with him. And I'm looking around, I'm like, a lot of you guys are good, but I don't want to work with anybody that bitches this much. So Mercedes Martinez was wrestling on these shows, and she was working her ass off, and she never complained about anything. And even though I hate the matches, I said, that's who I'm wrestling. She was larger, At that time, I was smaller. I weighed about 175, 180 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's her. That's who I want to wrestle. That's it. And I went out and had a very competitive match, a very good match with her. And the complaining drives me nuts. I can't take that. Oh, God.
Well, I gotta be honest, I wasn't really a fan of that match. I feel that, in my opinion, you gave her way too much. But that's my beef with all intergender matches. So
because
it is with me too. But there was alternately, it was more like the big FU to the guys who are doing all the complaining. It's like, fuck you, I'm going to work with the girl.
Yeah.
So would you say that rumbling happened when you booked girls in a main event from the boys?
A little. I heard a little of that, and I was pretty oblivious to complaints.
Yeah.
So, but I heard a little of that, I just, why is he doing this with them? It's like, because they work hard and they deserve it, and, they really did, they deserve that shot to have a little bit of that, whatever it's worth to you to work a main event on a small little show like that. They deserve that. And I wanted to provide that.
Would you say the show booked, did it draw, was it any different than any other show? Did it draw more, draw less, draw the same?
It was a little on the higher end, actually. I just, they would always, wrestle, they were always kept pretty strong. Now, whenever I had any cross-reference with them, it was not like a Mercedes Martinez match. It was, I'm not going even keel with you. You can hit me a couple times and I'm going to put you down. But, but they deserved, in and of themselves, they deserve that chance. And that's why I did it. And it's one of the few things I like about wrestling now is they're getting that, women are getting that chance now. And, they've certainly, it's progressed quite impressively. I still think, they fall victim to the just doing too much shit stuff. But, but it's nice to see at this point. It really is.
So would you say at all you felt vindicated, or it didn't make any difference to you once it was all said and done?
Vindicated? No, because I really don't put myself on that parallel with anything else. I really don't, but, I guess from the results of the show, the match was it was pretty decent. For what little complaining I heard, well, that's, again, a little fuck you to the bitchers.
So, you run a promotion, you're booking a promotion, you're wrestling on your promotion, you're wrestling elsewhere, yada, yada, yada. You go through the whole rigmarole. When did the doors actually close on Front Row Wrestling?
Oh, God. So timelines are horrible.
Was it about 2012?
No, it wasn't anywhere close to that.
Okay.
It was a lot earlier than that.
Really?
It was, some of those dates are really up. The beginning is off. I know. The only reason I know this is because I have some of the DVDs that were put out, and I just, like, one of them are dated like 2007. So it was more like about, if I'm thinking correctly, it was more like about 2005 to 2008.
Okay.
And, I know maybe whoever wrote that was, keeping some of Wolfman stuff into it. And I don't know. So, but.
Did you end up, like, merging with other companies? Or
we did make an announcement that we were merging with Liberty State Wrestling at the end of it. So
maybe that's why people thought maybe it kind of ended too. I don't know what would have caused the timeline, but I'm just curious if you had mentioned at any point that you guys were merging with another company.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
We did that. But I mean, again,
and that transition.
Social media wasn't very developed at that point.
Yeah.
It was just starting to become a thing. And, the social media that was out there at that time, I think Facebook was just really starting to gain some momentum. And then before that was MySpace. And what the hell are you going to do with that, for Christ's sakes? So.
Was it just the lack of making money and stuff is why you decided to shut your door?
Like I said before, a lot of it was, because I was financing the shows myself, and they were losing, I was losing some money. It wasn't big money I was losing, but I wasn't making any. And I had to go out and take a job that paid me less. I couldn't afford to keep it afloat. Love doing it. I wish I wouldn't do it now. I couldn't. I don't have that kind of energy anymore.
Do you remember the very last Front Row Wrestling show?
Ooh. It was probably in Rochester. Maybe not, but I think it was probably in Rochester. Yeah.
Do you know what the main event was, or kind of any of the card at all?
No, to be honest with you, that one I probably wiped out because I knew at that point, it was going to come to an end. I know I told guys, we're putting a bullet in this.
Were you pretty checked out at that point?
Not so much checked out, but it was more like just, guys, this is coming to an end, and and I didn't want it to come to an end, but it just kind of had to.
Yeah.
Since we've had some problems with accuracies on the internet, I'm going to read some things, see if these are correct. It says the last ever Front Row Wrestling champion was Johnny Vegas. Would you say that was correct?
I don't think Johnny Vegas was ever the main champion. We had 2 singles titles. We had, I called it the All-Star Championship, and then we had the Granite State Championship.
Which I'm a former one. I just want to point out.
Pizza garbage.
And, I don't recall. Maybe Johnny Vegas. Maybe I did put him over in the last show just because I've always loved Johnny Vegas. Always, always, always. I think he's so criminally underrated as far as local professional wrestlers. I mean, absolutely criminally underrated.
I
According to
100%
this,
agree with you.
He beat Sethrin November 6, 2009, according to this.
You know what? This probably makes sense. So that is probably accurate.
Okay.
And then we have the last ever Granite State champion was Tony Spencer. Do you think that is accurate?
That is definitely accurate. And then Tony Spencer would go work for Todd, No Limit, and he'd walk around with a Granite State title and claim he was a Granite State champion. And it was like, they don't have you're wrestling in Peabody, Mass.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about the Granite State champion. How do you defend? That was one thing I did when I did shows in other states.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to put the Granite State Championship on the line in
Massachusetts.
Vermont, even though it was right across, or Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Or, it was like,
No one's going to care about a New Hampshire title.
no, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, it says the last ever Front Row Wrestling tag team champions were Steve Marriott and Christian Angers. Do you think that is accurate?
Yes, yeah, that's probably pretty accurate.
And the one and only Front Row Wrestling Women's Champion was Mistress Belmont.
I don't know that I ever announced a women's championship. I don't think I
It
did.
says she defeated Vanity Vixen and Kamea in a 3-way match to become the first Front Row Wrestling All-Star Ladies
Maybe
champion
I did that.
July 31st, 2009.
That might have been so my timelines are apparently actually not bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, that might make sense. Maybe I think not. You asked if I was checked out. Well, obviously not. I kind of wanted at the very last one to probably do things for people that I thought very highly of, both ability-wise and personality-wise. Johnny Vegas would have been one of those guys.
Yeah.
So here you go. And Kathy Belmont certainly would have been one of those people. Here you go. So and Christian Angers and Stephen Marriott, I always thought the world of. So yeah, that's probably pretty accurate as well. That kind of makes sense.
All right, so you merge at the end with Liberty States Wrestling.
Yes.
Was there ever a discussion of you have to take this guy, I don't want this guy, anything like that?
No, I think that was more like a graceful way to kind of just end it semantically. He did use, there was some cross, we were using the guys, some guys, we were both using them, and just, we never, no, there was never any of that, because I just simply sat back and here's some money,
So it was just you literally, like you said before, you just became the money guy, and
and not like the total money guy. He wasn't financing his entire
you
show.
just invested.
Yeah, it was just what do you need to promote the show?
You had no say in the booking or anything?
I didn't want any say in
Okay.
it. I really didn't. I didn't feel comfortable. I just shit-canned my own company. So, it was like, I didn't want the potential heat that would come with that.
Mm-hmm.
I had already dealt with that for 3 years. So, I had no interest in, I called some of my own shots, but, besides that, no, not really.
Well, Mav, I want to say that I didn't know much about Front Row Wrestling. I had heard of it. I didn't even know that you had owned a company. So this was a very informative podcast for me. I got to learn a lot about you. I got to learn a lot about your company. And like I said before, the way it sounded, I really wish it was around when I was working, because I would have genuinely liked to have worked for it.
Well, any asshole can own something. It's keeping it afloat is the tough part.
So with that said, typically on our podcast, we like to do what's called the Fantastic
no, it's not
Four.
Typical. every week.
That's right.
Every episode, I should say.
Every week, we like to do. Yeah, that's
You'll know this since you're an avid listener to the show, Matt.
This is.
Am I the thing in this equation? Because I'm pretty big at this point.
So, we like to do this thing called the Fantastic Four, where we always ask the same 4 questions to all of our guests. So the first question we're going to ask, as a promoter, an owner, a wrestler for Front Row Wrestling and your entire dealings with professional wrestling, what would you say you are most proud of?
I would actually say when I was not that it was the biggest deal in the world, but it was decent. Was when I was actually the NECW champion. I was this guy wrestling on these carnival shows that, in New Hampshire for a guy that dressed up as a lobster. And, I didn't know how that was going to work in a Metro Boston kind of area. So, it was, and it was, I stayed there for quite a while, and so I was fairly proud of that because I always worked very hard. And I thought I put on some good matches. Sheldon calls me the most mispromoted wrestler he ever had, which I take as a compliment, actually.
Isn't he the promoter?
Well, he used bookers.
Okay.
Yes.
But as far as Front Row Wrestling in general, what would you say you were most proud of as far as that goes?
I think that first Rochester show was probably because it had hurdles and it went well. So I was pretty proud of that. I really was.
That's good.
All right, so in regards to Front Row Wrestling,
Okay.
what would you say is your biggest regret about running that company?
The lack of attention that I could sometimes give the actual promotional end of things, the physical promotion, getting in and selling the tickets. That was the biggest, I that was the part I was not grand at, and partially because I had a poor business plan.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a fun question. With your dealings with Front Row Wrestling, I'll just say wrestling in general because it's going to be a broad thing. And you, someone has said before, you'd gotten around. You've wrestled for a lot of promotions. I'd like to do Front Row if specific, but just in general. Who would you say in the entire dealings of professional wrestling that you hate the most, and will you name them? Or strongly dislike?
Not locally, Matt Stryker.
Is it just because he was the shits in the ring, or
he was
he
a
an
prick
asshole
on
too?
top of it. Yeah,
Okay.
He talked a big game and he sucked. It was like, that's the worst combination.
Everyone tells me he's fake as fuck.
I mean, I can work with a lot of people as long as they just admit what their actual ability level is. This guy put himself over like he was, a cosmic warrior from planet Zen, and he was, God, he
A guy
was.
that didn't belong in a ring.
No, he was god awful. He was terrible. Hate locally the most.
Yeah.
There's a few. Rocky Raymond's a piece of shit, but everybody knows that. I didn't get along with Robbie Ellis very good.
Really?
Yeah, never got along with it. I can't get into the details of it.
No,
but,
that's fine. It's weird to me because every time I ever saw Robbie, which I'm sure anyone who's in the business and they're hearing this, they're like, but anytime I dealt with Robbie, like when I was younger, I don't know, he just always seemed like this little young old guy who.
Well, he did himself in with me because when I had the pencil for Jeff, he would always want to get booked on the shows. And he would call my house, but he would call the house at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which isn't too bad for most people.
Yeah.
But I was also roofing at the time and getting up very early. I had kids, and my wife was actually the one who told him, don't call here anymore.
Yeah.
Aside from that, no. There's a few other ones that I don't like, but
Not strongly enough to
not
mention.
strongly enough to go, what a fucking piece of shit that fucking person was. Oh God.
All right, and the fourth question. In wrestling or in life in general, what does the future hold for Maverick Wild?
More operations. I am physically very broken down. Wrestling's a rough game, and then I did a rough job on top of it. I was never easy on myself. While I like to keep my environment loose when it came to training and stuff, There was about an 8 to 10 year block where I was in amazing shape, and I did it. As is typical of me, I don't look into anything before I do it. So I just figured I will just work out as hard as I can. And, I didn't look into things, even the most basic things like, hey, stupid, you got to drink water when you're doing this stuff. And, I was cut and lean, but I sometimes I'd get exhausted in the ring when I shouldn't because I was so dehydrated and know what was going on. And I was a friggin' nut. So I've done a lot of things to tear my body apart, and a lot of people, to get sick of hearing me say these things, but I'm up to 7 knee operations, including a complete knee replacement. I just had my 3rd knee operation on my right knee. I've had my left shoulder scoped. I'm told my right shoulder needs to be replaced, and it needs to be replaced soon. Wow. I've had back surgery. The right knee probably needs to be replaced at this point. So, and there's some other stuff they could do too. It just, everything else seems kind of minor compared to things like that. I'll be in line for some fusions at some point, and just, so operations. There's a lot of, I'm pretty beat up, and I think, if I'm disappointed in anything at myself at this point, it's injuries beat you, and it's like, I can't go to the gym and work out because I'll start working out and I'll start thinking I'm the same guy I used to be. And I can still move weight, but when I do it afterwards, it hurts too much, and then I can't go to the gym for 3 weeks. And then, so I'm pretty beat up. I like to have some involvement in wrestling maybe, but then sometimes I don't. Every time somebody suggests, I think about it on my own, and then somebody suggests, I go, fuck that.
That's funny. I have that same exact to a T internal struggle.
Yeah.
It's like I want to, and I think about it myself, and I'm like, yeah. And then the moment someone goes, hey, do this, I go, no, fuck that.
And I don't want to psychoanalyze you too much, but you had a fairly major back injury, if I remember correctly.
Neck.
Okay.
I had a neck injury.
And you know how tough that is. It's tough going there and trying to do something in a limited capacity.
Yeah.
When I trained people have asked, well, why don't you train people? Well, I tried that, and after I stopped wrestling, and the problem is I'm very hands-on. I can't hold myself back at all, and then I just screw myself up even more, and so I've become accustomed to really knowing that it's hard for me to be involved because I want to get in there and correct what I have to correct. And while the mind is there for it, the body just isn't, and so I stay out of it to protect myself, basically.
Makes sense.
Would you ever run a wrestling company again?
Knowing probably better now what the market would be like, and probably know how to
I would
approach
definitely
it better.
run the shows differently. I can tell you that much. I wouldn't do it at least all with my own money. There'd have to be somebody else's involved. And I would say I would probably do it. I could probably do it a couple of times a year, like some people do. But the style of wrestling today would kind of irritate me to watch. And I want to be able to enjoy myself when I do that. If I could, now admittedly it'd be easier to enjoy some of the wrestling if I was actually making money at it. So, I could kind of ignore what I don't like to some degree, but I'm not that kind of guy. I couldn't completely ignore it. So,
well, I personally, and I'm sure all our listeners are thinking the same thing. We got two great minds who think alike. I think we're sensing a future here, ladies and gentlemen. There might be a new promotion around the corner.
Well, that takes money.
That's
as we discussed, my money's going to my Disney trip.
You got two pockets, not just one.
I have a nickel, you have a nickel. We'll have two nickels to rub together.
So, can our loyal fans find you anywhere on social media?
I have my own. Jesus, I'm terrible at. I like being on social media, and I like it a lot. But at the same time, I'm terrible at it. I have my own. I have my own on Scott Daypre. I used to have it on Scott C. Daypre. But again, because I'm terrible at the internet, my phone died right before I had this last knee surgery, and it was all hooked up. It was actually hooked up to the old Front Row Wrestling email account, and it was hooked up through from a phone number from
Like
8 years ago. So I lost access to my original one, which was Scott C. Daypray. So I have to go under Scott Daypray now, and so you can find me there. You know, I like. You know, when I was on social media for years, I didn't really understand it, and I didn't use it correctly. And frankly, I was very angry on it sometimes. I was, and I've kind of pretty much put that to rest at this point.
Yeah.
I just can't do this seriously. You know, there could be lawsuits. You know.
So you have a Facebook, you have a Twitter, or Instagram.
I do not have a Twitter or an Instagram. You know, I probably will do a Twitter at some point. You know, but I don't now. I mean, you know, I don't have that much time. You know, I'm actually not bad with some with technical stuff. It's just
Whether you want to put the effort in or not.
Yeah, remembering passwords and things like that on top of everything else. Oh my, Dale, what's my password to this? Dale's my wife, and I'm just like, oh, you stupid son of a bitch. The poor woman has to shake her head constantly.
It's not wrestling related, but do you want to promote do you still have your business? Do you want to promote that?
I don't have a business. I'm just a working slob like anybody else at this point. I don't aspire to have a business. I wouldn't, for different reasons, I wouldn't want to get into owning a roofing company at this point. It's just the safety requirements are the biggest things, But I don't need that I don't need those kind of headaches anymore. I just don't,
All right. Well, I really want to thank you for joining us here in the New England Pro Wrestling Way studio. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Nice to be on. Thank you.
You'll come again sometime. We'll get more into, like I said earlier, the amount of time you spent in wrestling. We could probably spend 3-4 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of bullshit. Yeah.
And I hope you'll join us again. Anybody out there listening, if you have comments, questions, any kind of feedback whatsoever, we want to hear it, whether you think it's negative, positive. We suck. Maverick sucks. We weren't we were too nice. We weren't in-depth enough. We didn't attack him enough. Anything you want to say, we want to hear it, regardless of what it is. Julian, can you give them where they can find us on social media?
Yep. Right now, once again, by the time these release, because delayed timeline and whatnot, we're trying to stay ahead of schedule. I'm probably going to have a page up. I'm not really sure what the URL is going to be, but you're going to be able to search for Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way. But if you need to contact me directly, you can reach me as Julian Starr. That's STARR on Facebook. You can go to Twitter.
Mirzak.
You can go to Twitter, which is Julian_Star89. And then you can also follow me on Instagram at star32989. But once the page gets up, that'll primarily be where you want to reach us.
And we welcome all suggestions. We especially want to hear any ideas for future topics or future guests you'd like to see on the show.
Yes, entertainment segments, anything that you can think of, like literally people, anything you want to hear, listen to, see, whatever. Please let us know, because we are open-minded. We want to do anything we can to make people happy, make them entertained, and just stuff that people have always wanted to listen to. I feel like they never have an outlet to get it out there. We are willing to do that for you. So just let loose and let us know.
And we genuinely appreciate and thank you for listening to the show.
Absolutely. We appreciate every listener that we have. Obviously, we're not going to exist without you, so thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, and I want you to join us again next time for another episode of Truth, Justice, and the New England Pro Wrestling Way.